Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans in business. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons.
Today's guest is a Marine Corps veteran and pioneering entrepreneur who founded GoDaddy and co-founded the Bob and Renee Parsons Foundation. His journey from a challenging East Baltimore upbringing through Vietnam to transforming resilience into success in business and philanthropy has inspired so many. Please welcome Marine Bob Parsons. Bob, welcome to Warrior Money.
Oh, glad to be here, guys. I mean, I'm sandwiched in between two doggies. And you know what? That's a good place to be.
There you go.
Well, hey, brother, listen, we're so pumped that you're on with us. We always start our interviews with bottom line up front. So you have an incredible rags to riches story, Bob. You went from a humble beginning in East Baltimore to being one of Forbes' 400 most wealthy Americans. What advice would you give the young entrepreneurs, young Marines, troops that get to where you are today?
Well, the number one thing is I'll tell you when, I had a young guy ask me that I was speaking to a group not too long ago, and he wanted to know, what he should do to be successful in a golf business. I told him, pick another business. All right. So that's the first thing. But, the first thing is, a couple of things is one is pick the right business, and usually that starts with something that you really like to do, because if you love something, it tells you all in secrets. The other thing is teach yourself not to worry, because, if you spend a lot of time worrying, I mean, it'll just get in the way of everything. One of my blessings is I just don't worry. And so if you open the door one day and something bites my legs off, well, I guess that's the way it's going to be, and I'll have to deal with it. But as far as it goes.
That's right.
love that.
We're both from the Philanthropy region. We talk about trust the process. So you just, you work hard, you figure it out. Bob, let me get to really, both Dan and I come from really humble beginnings as well. I delivered newspapers, I bussed tables, was a waiter, worked in a factory like you did. But you literally sold newspapers. You worked in construction. You worked in factory. You hustled to get where you are. Some of that work ethic has that driven you, that DNA for your whole career and what you've done?
Well, yeah, I mean, during when I first started, it was out of necessity, because my parents were both broke, and mostly because they were both gamblers and weren't very good at it. And if I wanted something, I had to, I had to work to get the money. And then after the Marine Corps, it's because, I mean, they just taught me that ethic. And, one of the things I tell everybody is everything I've ever accomplished, I owe to the United States Marine Corps.
That's awesome. Well, let me talk about the Marine Corps service in Vietnam, Bob. I mean, your record in Vietnam with the 1st Marine Division was incredible. You earned the Purple Heart, the Combat Action Ribbon, the Vietnam Gallantry Cross. You were wounded in action. I look at, Dan and I talk about as two members of the post 9/11 generation. That Vietnam generation could have sat in our hands when I came home from Iraq, right? But you were the first ones to say, welcome home, brother. Welcome home, sister. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, the reason is because we were the first troops that ever fought for this country that when we came home, we weren't welcome. I mean, many of us were greeted by anti-war protesters with carrying placards that, had things like drug addicts, murderers, Nazis, I mean, baby killers, on and on. And I mean, my favorite was, they called us drug addicts. And I don't think anybody took more drugs than the anti-war crowd. They lived in a glass house.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about our military service on the show and how it catapults you into business success. Can you talk a little bit more about what skills did you learn in the Marine Corps specifically? And then how did you start your businesses when you left the Marine Corps? Like, you could talk a little bit about that transition that you went through.
Well, the thing I learned in the Marine Corps was two things. Most of all was responsibility, the importance of responsibility, and the significance of having discipline in order to get there. That, you didn't have to want to do it, you didn't have to like doing it, but you had to do it. And then, those things led to, I had a, right to be proud of everything that I did in the Marine Corps and later on in my life. So, the very important things, very intangible, could be applied in any business or any pursuit. But that's what the Marine Corps taught me.
Yeah, I love when you said that this first part of this conversation when you said that's because I had to. That's why I started doing paper routes. Can you talk to me about the origins of your business? Did you buy a company? Did you come into a company? Like how did you form the thing?
Well, I never bought a company because I mostly didn't have any money. So I eventually started uber small, and kind of lost whatever little bit of money I had every year, and until I figured out how to get things going. So when I quit my job and started working Parsons Technology full time, I invested $40,000 in it, which was all the money I had in the world, and 10 years later, I sold that business for $64 million.
That's amazing.
So, it was, I never seen that I never had that kind of money or even dreamed of having that kind of money my whole life. And then I used that money to start what became GoDaddy. And eventually, GoDaddy sold for, I sold 71% for $2.3 billion. And, I still marvel at what a stack of cash that is.
Me too.
Bob,
Me too.
I don't know. It's amazing. Your first company, though, when you sold Parsons Technology, right, and you sold it for $64 million to Intuit, right? Do a lot of folks, when they sell their companies the first time, do they usually just go in the Philanthropy? They usually sit in their hands? Because it seems like you were like just getting started.
What? I was a guy in motion, and one of the things that powered me is when I came back from the war, I had I had a pretty good case of PTSD, and I mean I was only in combat for a month, but that was enough to do the trick for me. And so what I did was most most guys that have significant PTSD, I guess women too, what they'll do is, they'll self-medicate one way or another. And well, I did that with uh, school, and I did it with my jobs, and I mean, my jobs being, what business I was involved in, and I started Parsons Technology in 1984, and that's the last time I worked for anybody. Um, so, you're working for yourself. You better be an object in motion. I used to at Parsons Technology work 60 hours straight. I would work a 60-hour shift and then go home for 8 hours, sleep a little bit and so forth, and then come back and work another 60 hours. And I'll tell you something, I loved it. So, I mean, you got to have that kind of ethos.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. When you're successful in business, which you've been, and then you transition some of that success into philanthropy, talk to me a little bit about the Bob and Renee Parsons Foundation and how you're supporting veterans.
Well, the way we support veterans is uh, largely, but not and totally limited to supporting the Semper Fi fund. We started that. What year did we start the contributing to the Semper Fi fund, guys?
2013.
Okay, we started giving to them in 2013, and then very quickly at $10 million a year, and we used that 10 million as leverage to get a match, so to raise more money. So during the time we've been doing that, we have given them $112 million, and we've been able to raise $234 million. Um, Since 2013. Not bad, huh?
Wow.
Not bad at all. Not
That's
bad
in
at all.
12 years. That's amazing. And what's some of the things that give you the most joy when you look at what the Semper Fi Fund does? I'm familiar with it, as is Dan, but tell our viewers, what does the Semper Fi Fund do and why does it make your heart smile?
Well, what they do is they provide, first of all, support for critically wounded men and women in all the armed forces. When I started with them, it was just the Marine Corps, and they quickly expanded it to to the rest of the armed forces, including the Coast Guard. I believe. They are they their percentage of overhead is the lowest, um, of any organization of its type by far. They're rated 4 stars by Charity Navigator, and a Charity Navigator rates all not-for-profit foundations, and only 2% of them get those 4 stars. So, I thought that was pretty significant. And what they do is like, for example, let's say a young man loses his legs. Well, I mean, that's a pretty critical thing. Well, when that when he comes to, they in many cases will have gotten her family to their bedside, and and they're there also. So, the game is that they're gonna be with that individual, uh, throughout the rest of their life as they're needed, and they spend a lot of time helping them convert, back into civilian life as a productive and functioning and happy civilian.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, we're going to go on a break, but I just want you to know that, Dan lives in Chester County, Pennsylvania. I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. But where I live in Bristol Borough, there's a young troop who just came back. He's a wounded warrior in Walter Reed. Just 2 weeks ago, he went home. The Semper Fi Fund went into his house in Bristol Borough. His mom, I know her. She's a waitress at our local King George Inn. They provided a new shower, so because it's wheelchair accessible, really reconfigured their house to make sure that he could, instead of staying in Walter Reed, they could do his rehab back home in Bucks County. I just want to say thank you so much for doing it. It's making an incredible difference even today. If it's okay, Bob, we're going to go on a quick break, but be right back with Bob Parsons. Welcome back to Warrior Money. We're here with Bob Parsons, a great Vietnam Marine, a leading veteranpreneur for that generation, and someone who makes us incredibly proud to be American warrior. Bob, welcome back to Warrior Money.
Pleased to be here, guys.
Hey, Bob, we talk a lot on this show about finding purpose, and it sounds like you found a little bit of purpose in your business life. But within finding purpose, we also talk a little bit about mental health and physical health. And I know you mentioned earlier that you struggled with PTSD when you're coming home from Vietnam War. Can you talk a little bit more about your experiences and struggles with PTSD and how you've explored different treatment options to support it?
Well, when I first came back, I knew I was different than I was before I left. I was a lot more serious, that's for sure. Had a flash temper, wanted to, social isolation to a certain degree, and that sort of thing. But I didn't think much of it, other than I just wasn't happy. I mean, was depressed a lot of the time. And so what I did was I buried myself in whatever I had in front of me. When I was a kid in school, I was a terrible student. Failed failed 5th grade. Would not have graduated. I mean, my grades were horrific every year. I wouldn't have graduated from high school if I didn't join the Marine Corps and show my teachers during 1968, the height of the Vietnam War, that I joined the Marine Corps. And so they all passed me. It just was, um, well, there was just crazy times, and I even forgot the question. I got so wrapped up in it.
No. I just want. So we're talking about mental and physical health as being one of the parts
All
of
right,
the things that we're
okay.
talking about.
Yeah.
And
Mental,
we just were
mental.
talking about your transition and how you've explored treatments and things that have made you feel better about things.
As time went on, I became more and more unhappy. I would have guys walk up to me at a golf club I belonged to and say, "Hey, Bob, I heard you were in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam War." I'd start crying. I mean, right on the spot. You do that often enough, people quit talking to you. Um, so anyhow, the first thing that I did was, I linked up with the guys I served with, uh, during the war, the guys that were in my squad, and, I went down to see them. I rode down on a motorcycle to Gulfport, Mississippi, and, visited with them, and, just being with them made, such a difference. I hadn't felt like that in a long while, but it only lasted a while. I did other stuff like, a neurofeedback thing called Saraset, which helped. But what really turned the corner for me in 2017, I bought this book called How to Change Your Mind. It was written by Michael Pollan, who is now a dear friend of mine. And it is a treatise on psychedelics that reads like a novel. It talks about, psychedelics, what they've been used for over the millennia by many civilizations, mostly in South America, and how they have just an absence of mental health issues, and how they were used in the country here in the 50s, where once they were legal, and but our administration, federal administration, because they were out to lunch, made them all illegal, and we're just getting them back into circulation today.
Yeah.
So what happened was I told my wife, who's my third wife, the first two booted me out. They gave me my walking papers because I was more than they could handle, and they were good women, but, no, I just was too much for them.
Well,
So anyhow, Renee's my third wife, and, in 2017, after reading this book, I told Renee, I said, "I would like to try psychedelics." I mean, before I read the book, I wouldn't dream of doing anything like that because I believed all the bullshit that was, spread about that, you take LSD, makes you wanna try to fly and jump off a building and all that kind of stuff. That's nonsense. So anyhow, hey guys, figure this out. She had me linked up with two guides that travel under the radar, treating veterans with psychedelics in 2 weeks.
wow.
And so I met with them in Hawaii and tried 3 different types of psychedelics over 4 days, and had a lot of tears, a lot of, even flashback, uh, uh, to some of the stuff that really bothered me, and so after that, my wife was the first one to notice. She noticed that I was a different guy, and, so the next people to notice were the people that worked with me. They couldn't believe it. Who is this guy? I
Yeah.
mean, this guy, he's happy, he's complimentary, he says, he just says nice things. He listens. This can't be Bob. Well, it was me. And
Right.
what I like to say it, after being treated with psychedelics, it had been 49 years for me since the war. And guys, I finally came home.
Wow, that's powerful. That's part of the whole health unit and the VA. I mean, whether it's psychedelics, chiropractic care, yoga, etc. Because when you look at the signature injuries of the Iraq-Afghanistan war, it is PTSD or traumatic brain injury. And I think as all Americans, we just want to make sure our brother and sister veterans get the best care possible available to them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that totally.
Yeah. So Bob, when we end up here with Warrior Q&A, so Dan's going to lead us off here. This is rapid fire questions. We're going to ask you, we know, you're a Marine, so you might have some crowns out. You might have to take notes, but we're going to go fast and furious here with Dan Coons and Warrior Q&A.
All right, Bob. What's some money advice that you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Excuse me?
What's some money advice that you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Well, I wish this book would have been available, which is one I just wrote, and a lot of the stuff that I learned. But the thing that I learned first, and I learned this during the Vietnam War, was not to worry, and I taught myself not to worry by accepting the worst possible outcome and accepting it, and then just doing what I could to hang on. And one of the blessings I've had in my business career is not worrying. Worry is just a beast that'll eat you alive. And I don't think if you're a worrier, your likelihood of being successful in business, well, it's much more difficult for sure.
What's the biggest financial mistake that people make that that on their way to success?
Well, the biggest mistake they make, I think, is listening to the naysayers, and worrying about what's going to happen, and if how much money they're going to lose, and this, that, or the other thing. And I'd say, think it through and have a solid plan, and then execute it, baby.
And last question: what's the most unexpected part of your journey?
Most unexpected part of my journey?
Any part of it, yeah.
The fact that it happened.
There you
Are
go.
you kidding me?
I love it. I love it. Thanks so much.
Hey, Bob, thank you so much for joining us at Warrior Money. It's going to have to wrap up our show for today, but you are just a great American. We appreciate being on, and we can't wait to read your book. So listen, that's our show.
For just a minute.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, of course.
This is my book, Fire in the Hole. You can get it everywhere. It's easiest to get if you order it from PXG direct. And I have a deal where I sell it at cost. For veterans, it is $11.60, or active military or police or teachers or, any of our heroes, which is what we like to call them. And there's no shipping.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, it's a hell of a good read. It's a New York Times bestseller.
Well, Bob, thanks so much, buddy. We're going to check that out. And by the way, you mentioned PXG. That was the third company that has done phenomenally well. You started with Parts Technology, GoDaddy, PXG. You can get the book at cost at PXG. So, Bob, thank you so much. And that's our show. So listen, subscribe, and review Warrior Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast, or find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons. We'll see you again next week.